The smoke sat thick enough to taste. Frank Sinatra sat in the leather chair across from Tony Marchetti's desk, legs crossed, gray suit pressed sharp as a knife edge. The club owner's office, 12 feet by 14, wood paneling gone dark with nicotine, smelled like old bourbon and new sweat. Marchetti shuffled papers he didn't need to read. Outside the door, the last musicians were packing brass into felt-lined cases. The Moonlight Room had been dead for an hour. 73 people had shown up. 2 years ago, Sinatra pulled 400 on a Tuesday. "Frank, you gotta understand," Marchetti said. His silk tie hung loose. "This ain't personal." Sinatra looked at his fingernails. "I got overhead. I got the liquor license hearing next month. I got the Teamsters breathing down my neck about the kitchen staff." Marchetti pulled a handkerchief across his forehead. "You're a hell of a singer, Frank, you know that, but the numbers." "What numbers?" Sinatra's voice came out flat, not a question, a dare to keep talking. Marchetti glanced at the open ledger on his desk. Red ink bled through 3 months of columns. "Last week we did $1,200. You're costing me $1,800 a week plus the band plus." "So you're done?" "I'm saying we don't renew. February 1st we go our separate ways. I bring in a trio, maybe a girl singer, something light. People want to drink, they don't want—" Marchetti stopped himself. Sinatra tilted his head 1 degree. "Don't want what?" "Nothing, I'm just saying times change." "Times?" "The crooner thing, Frank, it's—" Marchetti reached for his rocks glass, found it empty, set it back down. "Look, you had a hell of a run. Nobody's saying you didn't. But Ava left you, the voice ain't what it was, the kids now, they want." "You through?" Marchetti blinked. "What?" "I asked if you're through talking." The club owner opened his mouth, closed it. Sinatra stood up, not fast. He smoothed the front of his jacket, shot his cuffs once. The cufflinks, silver, understated, caught the desk lamp's yellow light. "Okay, Frank, look, I know this is—" Sinatra walked to the door. "Frank, for Christ's sake, say something." The singer's hand rested on the doorknob. He turned his head, not his body. His eyes found Marchetti's face, held it. 10 seconds passed. Sinatra opened the door and walked through it. He didn't close it behind him. Marchetti sat alone in the smoke, staring at the open doorway. His hand shook when he reached for the phone. The Moonlight Room closed on March 19, 1953. The official story: failed liquor license renewal. But the Teamsters had delivered the beer on time. The fire marshal found no violations. The health department passed the kitchen without notes. What happened was simpler. The distributors stopped calling back. The linens company wanted cash up front. The talent bookers, the ones who fed acts to clubs all over Los Angeles, said they were booked solid, check back in 6 months. The Friday night crowd that used to pack the bar started showing up at the Trocadero, at Ciro's, at Macambo. No announcement. No campaign. They just stopped coming. Marchetti called in every favor he had. Nobody returned the calls. By March he was running the club on a skeleton crew: 2 bartenders, 1 cook, a coat check girl who came in 3 nights a week. The Friday before closing, 17 people showed up. They drank well drinks and left by 11. Marchetti sat in the empty room at midnight, staring at the stage where Sinatra used to stand. He tried to remember if Sinatra had threatened him. He couldn't. The man had just looked at him and left. The next week, Marchetti's wife filed for separation. The week after that, his bookie told him to take his action elsewhere. The car he'd parked on the street for 12 years got towed 3 times in 2 weeks, always legally, always just barely. He never saw Sinatra again. Frank Sinatra made 3 phone calls the night he left the Moonlight Room. The first was to a man who owned a produce company that supplied half the restaurants in Los Angeles. They'd met once, at a charity dinner, talked for 10 minutes about nothing. The man said he'd heard Marchetti was having a hard time. Sinatra said he'd heard the same thing. The second call went to a booking agent who owed Sinatra a favor from 1947, something about a girl, a hotel room, and a photographer who never developed his film. The agent said he'd make sure his act stayed clear of the Moonlight Room. No hard feelings, just business. The third call went to a union rep Sinatra had sung for at a strike rally in '49. Sinatra asked how the man's daughter was doing. The man said she was fine, got into college. Sinatra said that was wonderful. Then he mentioned Tony Marchetti's name, just mentioned it. The union rep said he understood. Sinatra never explained what Marchetti should understand. He never needed to. 4 months after the Moonlight Room closed, Frank Sinatra walked into KHJ Studios on Melrose Avenue. Capitol Records had signed him in March, a last-chance deal, penny ante money, no guarantees. The first session was set for April 30th. The song, "I've Got the World on a String." Nelson Riddle stood at the conductor's podium, 32 years old, nervous as a horse in a thunderstorm. He'd never arranged for Sinatra before. He'd heard the stories. Difficult, temperamental, finished. Sinatra arrived 14 minutes early, carrying nothing, saying nothing. He nodded at Riddle, shook hands with the concertmaster, stood at the microphone and waited. They ran through the arrangement once. Sinatra listened, eyes closed. When the band finished, he opened his eyes and looked at Riddle. "Again," Sinatra said. They played it again. Sinatra nodded. Once more, slower on the bridge. Riddle adjusted. The band played it a third time. Sinatra stepped up to the microphone. "Let's make one." The red light came on. He sang it in one take. When the engineer played it back, nobody in the control room said anything for 5 seconds. Then Riddle started laughing, not because it was funny, but because he didn't know what else to do with the feeling in his chest. The song hit radio in June. By August, every disc jockey in America was playing it. By December, Sinatra had signed a 7-picture deal with United Artists, and Capitol Records was pressing 300,000 copies a week. Tony Marchetti heard "World on a String" on the radio in his kitchen one morning while frying eggs. He turned it off and never turned it back on. Years later, after Sinatra had won the Oscar for From Here to Eternity, after he'd married Ava again and divorced her again, after he'd become untouchable, Nelson Riddle told a story at a dinner party in Beverly Hills. Someone asked him what it was like to work with Sinatra in those early days, the comeback days when nobody thought the singer had anything left. Riddle sipped his scotch and smiled. "First day in the studio," Riddle said. "He walks in like he owns the place. And I'm thinking, this guy's washed up. Everybody knows it, even he knows it." "But," someone asked, "but he didn't act like it." Riddle swirled his glass. "He acted like the rest of us just didn't know yet, like we were all about to find out." "Find out what?" Riddle shrugged. "That he was right and we were wrong." Someone laughed. Riddle didn't. "Thing about Frank," Riddle said, quieter now, "he didn't need to explain himself. He'd just wait, and if you didn't figure it out, you stopped mattering." "That's cold," someone said. Riddle nodded. "That's Frank." Tony Marchetti died in 1971, alone in a studio apartment in Glendale. Heart attack. The obituary ran 4 lines in the Valley Times. Frank Sinatra died in 1998, surrounded by family, in a house that cost more than Marchetti made in his entire life. Nobody ever proved Sinatra destroyed the Moonlight Room. No paper trail, no witnesses, no smoking gun. Just a man who walked out of an office at 2:47 a.m. and never looked back. But here's what they don't tell you in the documentaries. 3 days after the Moonlight Room closed, Marchetti's daughter, 16, honor student, planning to study music at UCLA, auditioned for a scholarship program funded by a foundation nobody'd heard of. She got in. Full ride. 4 years, tuition and housing. The foundation's paperwork listed 3 board members. 2 were lawyers. One was a retired music executive who used to work for Columbia Records when Sinatra was starting out. Marchetti never knew. His daughter graduated in 1957, became a high school music teacher, retired in 1995. She taught in Los Angeles public schools for 38 years. Thousands of kids learned to read music because of her. She also never knew. In 1954, a reporter from Downbeat magazine asked Sinatra about the Moonlight Room. "I heard the owner there had some hard luck," the reporter said. Sinatra was sitting in a dressing room at the Sands, Las Vegas. He was tying his bow tie in the mirror. "That's so," Sinatra said. "You were there till the end, right? Any comment?" Sinatra finished the tie, checked the knot, turned around. "Man makes his own luck," Sinatra said. "Even you." Sinatra smiled. The smile didn't reach his eyes. "Especially me. This is what power looks like when it's real. No threats, no speeches, no explanations. A man sits in a chair, listens, stands up, walks out. And 6 weeks later, the world rearranges itself. People talk about Sinatra's connections, the mob, the politicians, the studio heads. They're not wrong, but they miss the point. Sinatra's real power wasn't who he knew. It was that he never had to ask. He'd look at you and you'd understand, or you wouldn't. And if you didn't, you'd find out later. By then it was too late. On the last night, the moonlight room was open. After the health inspector had come and gone, after the last bartender clocked out, Marchetti sat alone in his office with the lights off. He thought about that night, too. 4:47 a.m., the smoke, the silence. He remembered Sinatra's face when he turned at the door. No anger, no hurt, nothing. Marchetti finally understood what he'd seen. It wasn't contempt. Contempt means you still care enough to feel something. It was indifference. Sinatra had looked at him the way you'd look at a chair you were about to stand up from. Useful once, not anymore. Marchetti started crying at 1:15 a.m. He stopped at 1:47. Then he locked the door and went home. He never told anyone about the crying. Not his wife, not his lawyer, not the priest he confessed to twice a year. Some humiliations you carry alone. Frank Sinatra never spoke about Tony Marchetti publicly. He never mentioned the moonlight room in interviews. He never told the story at parties. When people asked him about the dark years, 1952, 1953, the divorce, the box office bombs, the empty clubs, he'd shrug and say the same thing every time. "I kept singing." That was it, 3 words. But if you pushed, if you asked how he kept singing when nobody wanted to listen, he'd look at you the way he looked at Marchetti. And you'd stop asking. This is what you need to know about Frank Sinatra. He didn't win by being louder. He won by being quieter. He didn't win by making threats. He won by making people realize they'd already lost. He didn't win by proving he was powerful. He won by never needing to prove anything. The night he walked out of Tony Marchetti's office, he didn't destroy a man. He just stopped holding him up. And Marchetti fell on his own. So here's what you have to ask yourself. Was Frank Sinatra a man who quietly helped Tony Marchetti's daughter get an education while erasing her father's livelihood? Or was he a man who understood that power isn't about revenge, it's about making sure everyone knows where they stand? Or was he something else entirely, something we don't have a word for yet? Because the truth is, nobody ever figured out Frank Sinatra. They just learned to stay on the right side of his silence. Do you think Marchetti understood what he'd done wrong? Or did he just understand that he'd lost?